welcome back to another episode of Pollinate. I don't know if you guys will recognize our guest today, but he shares my last name. He's definitely no better looking than me. In fact, there are people that accuse us of being equally ugly. So my brother Mike, oldest, wisest brother, has been a great friend and comrade in arms in the fruit business. He sort of helps bail me out when I get in over my head, which is fairly often. And anyway, but I don't want to swell his head up here by making him feel too good. But without further ado, brother Michael Robert Rasch. We were a family of 9, and he got to be the oldest. And so Mike, just tell us a little bit about, what you're doing now, what your farm operation looks like over there. And then, we'll have to talk about a little side note about brother Mike. Okay. Is that farming for him is really like a hobby, and hunting is more like the serious work. That's what he's doing right now, on his way out to Montana hunting, and stopped off here, do a little hunting as well. And so fruit farming kind of got in the way of that sometimes, but not always. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, there you let all my secrets out. That is a vice, definitely the hunting, but I guess it's not a bad vice. Anybody that grows fruit or farms earns their keep. So if you can get away for a little while, and I've got an understanding family, they promote this. I think they want to just get rid of me for a couple of weeks. But anyway, we come in. I bought the family farm, the one that our parents started. And it was old, standard orchards, trees. And it had a small retail thing based around you-pick cherries. So it kind of had a start, at least I had a start getting into this, of commercial fruit growing and a small retail affiliate too. And since then, we've gone to try to build up the retail part of it. Figure there's more value there on a direct sell than planting more trees. And by doing that, we've neglected to replant the older varieties, and that's been a trade-off because now those varieties don't have the value fresh that a lot of the new commercial varieties do. So kind of in that transition, there were trade-offs when my wife and I made the choice to move towards the retail more than put the finances towards replanting to more commercial viable varieties. There's a lot of potential there for growth. We had name association with the long-established cherry direct sell market, but now we've opened for the apple and seasonal, extended the season and gone into a fall market based around apples and all the other value-added items. So we're slowly building that, but I guess one thing could honestly say is by not being proactive on replanting and not growing a commercial operation, you can fall by the wayside real easily. It's still supply and demand, this whole apple thing, and when you diversify it and you can spread it over more acres, I just see in the future it's going to be the smaller operations that are going to be, especially with older varieties, it's going to be hard. The bigger operations are going to be the ones that will probably keep marching forward. So
let's talk a little bit about that because, from where I sit, the Michigan apple industry and the apple industry in the States in general has changed dramatically in our lifetimes. I mean, the size of the orchards has changed a lot. The composition of them, if you look back I was looking at an old Michigan Flavor Best poster that showed all the different varieties that were the major varieties in Michigan. There were like almost 20 varieties.
Yeah.
I bet now there wouldn't be 10 varieties that would constitute 90% of what people grow.
Exactly. And if you look back 15, 20 years ago and more, a lot of the bigger fresh growers operations, they were strictly processing growers at that time. So they've made the transition to go to strictly fresh. And it's taken away needs for a lot of those old, established varieties that were earmarked then and especially now for processing. So there's still guys are doing okay with the last few years' prices on some of the processing and even juice prices, but with our fixed costs keep going up and our returns have kind of plateaued. There's not a lot of margin there, and I think that's been the number one thing I hear from growers West Coast and home. The big growers, they're looking at labor efficiencies. They're looking at their bottom line really hard now because our fixed costs, especially harvesting, which is labor, and the chemical costs, cost of raising the fruit keep going up, and the end's got to justify the means. So I think in the future, the guys that are going to stay in it are really looking hard at labor efficiencies, mechanization where they can, and just utilizing the labor they have more efficiently.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable as you look here, having transplanted to Iowa and looking at the corn and bean kind of situation and the progression of that. First of all, in the 80s, there was a big problem. A bunch of growers went out of business. The ones that survived have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Equipment's gotten bigger. Of course, it's a lot less labor intensive, obviously. Mm-hmm. But there again, the prices of that commodity are not they're not going up alongside the cost of producing that commodity. Yeah. Apples in the 90s were in the same situation. I think generally perceived that we lost about 30% of all the fruit growers in America in the 1990s for the same reasons. Labor costs, everything keep going up. The demand of the bigger supermarkets, the buying power got really strong to where they could command, basically name the price in some ways, or at least cap the lid on the price, and demands for quality went way up. A lot of growers got out of it. Now we see a resurgence, and there were some good years after that as growers, less supply, growers went out of business, and then and now we're back to where we seem to have regained all that production plus some, the difference being, like you just said, in Michigan, which was traditionally a largely processing industry. New York had a pretty strong processing industry as well. So not all your fruit had to be a number one. You could grow it for processing and still make some money. Well, that bottom fell out of the processing price for sure. But the big trend is that the growers have shifted into high quality production, where you're getting 90% pack outs and stuff like that. So 90% of your fruit, instead of 50% before or 60%, now 90% of your fruit is number one quality, not a lot in the processing. And but if the price of that fresh pack is not good, then you're stuck.
Right, and that's kind of the plate we've set for ourselves is we're so efficient now with yields. And we're producing quality fruit, and but we're planting. So we're structured to sell that crop year in, year out, I think, as we speak. But what they sell it for, is that going to justify our input costs? I mean, what's the bottom line going to be? So that's the real scary part that I see right now, is moving forward, is our efficiencies and our production scale, and what the supply chain will take. And
so when we were younger, we're still fairly young at heart.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. But even younger at heart, there was a pretty good yield. Might have been 600 bushel a acre.
5 to 600 bushel to acre. You know.
And now out west, with the right sunshine and stuff, they'll do 1,500 bushel the acre pretty common.
Exactly. So it's almost threefold.
Almost threefold. And the number of acres has crept back up to where it was previous to losing all those farmers. And so you have more production, and the bigger proportion of that production is high quality.
Yep.
So it puts a lot of pressure on prices. People don't, and
it really does. And like I said, they'll sell the crop, but what they sell it for, is it going to keep everyone afloat? Because our fixed costs keep going up and up. And,
and the other cost is, of course, the other cost that keeps going up and up is packing costs. So a commercial grower brings his crop in 20 bushel wooden bins, by and large, into a packing plant, and they get run over these very efficient now computerized graders that are really amazing. That'll check them for color. It'll even check them for internal defects, and it'll weight them, size them by weight, very, very accurately. But the cost of that stuff, it's not $1 million to set one of these up anymore. It's $20 to $40 million, I think, to set one of these up. And so every bushel that goes over, what I heard some years ago when we were out in Washington, that they were talking then about $12 a bushel to run stuff over the line. And I mean, that's if you're selling your stuff for $20 a bushel and you're paying $12 to run it over a line, it doesn't leave a lot.
No, it doesn't. It surely doesn't. And that's the thing. You see a lot of the operations, the bigger operations, if they're packed their own fruit, and that's where their margin is. But they have to make money. They got to keep packing fruit. So it's the outside smaller growers. They're relying on them bringing their fruit in, but it doesn't leave a lot for those growers, like you say. So.
Yeah, it's it'll be interesting. I mean, I think one of the things, just looking at, compared to, let's say, a lot of the corn and bean farmers around here, is that it does seem like fruit farmers have been able to retain family members, maybe not all of them, generally probably not, but it doesn't, and that's me looking from the outside, you'd know better, but it does seem like up in Michigan there are a lot of operations that are continuing, with the next generation.
And I really respect them, the ones that can do that. But I guess on my end, with all girls especially, I don't know, looking forward, maybe I'm a little bit pessimistic there, but I don't know if I would encourage that at this point, because it's not an easy road at all. And
it's not an easy road. And then, I mean, you said to all girls, but I mean, we also have to think about what kind of girls we got, because I mean, Brother Mike's got a very unmanageable mob of girls.
Oh,
I mean,
they're
hellacious hellions. I mean, that's all you can do is say that's just the case. No,
they're spirited.
They're high-spirited gals.
Yes.
High-spirited kids. And, well, we don't want to swell their heads either. But they're all right. On a good day,
yeah, we'll
they're
keep
okay.
them.
As they used to say in Arkansas, they're keepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, the point is a good one, is, what do you look to do, in terms of the farm and stuff down the road, and it is hard. I mean, it
really is, because after you've spent your whole life farming and you work 80, 100-hour weeks, and then you look at the end of the year sometimes, and you're so heavily leveraged, you borrow against everything you own to operate, so to speak. It takes the fun out of it, and I know I've been there. I've got good close friends that are there, and they look back now, and a lot of them are successful with a lot of acreage, big operations, but they're heavily leveraged yet. So I don't know what the good answer. I'm not trying to sound pessimistic, but
it's a tough
it's a tough business.
Tough business, and it's not as there is some insurance for horticultural crops, but it's not like the corn and bean guy.
Right.
It's not that level of protection. And so, you're at number one, an acre of apples used to cost, maybe you're talking $2,000 to $5,000 an acre tops, to put an acre in back with semi-dwarf trees at $150 to the acre or something like that. now with fully dwarfed stock going in at 1,200, 1,500 trees to the acre, and then you've got trellising and irrigation. You got to have, out in Washington, the last thing I saw in the Good Fruit Grower was they're talking $60,000 an acre is what they figure.
Yeah, and some of that's above ground costs, you know.
Yeah.
So it's staggering. And then you look around and you see the scale that's being replanted. So everybody that's in it are taking a leap of faith any way you cut it. But you got to, and just like this, I brought Paul some Christmas trees out. They're expanding in that, and right now there's a real sag in the production because of the glut of production years back. So maybe it kind of coincides with that, where it's oversupply now and people are planting heavily yet, and they'll be the ones that'll carry the need and the supply years to come when it's needed. I don't know that, but
well, one of the things that's also going on at this time that sort of it sort of paves the way for larger operations is this club varieties and things like that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of new apple variety, well, pretty much every new apple variety that's, in the days of old, Johnny Appleseed days, a lot of the varieties just sprang up out of cider piles. You press your cider fruit, you throw all the skins and the seeds out there in a big pile, and up sprout some trees. And people would find a lot of trees, just wild trees. They'd say, oh, that's a good apple, or, we'll just call that a Martha's Best.
Paula Red.
Yeah, Paula Red. Yeah. Yep. I mean, there's a ton of them in our area. Paula Red came from. But nowadays, pretty much all of the new varieties, I would say all of them, are bred in different facilities, whether it's University of Minnesota or some of the other universities around the U.S. New Zealand has a big breeding program, Switzerland, France. There's lots of breeding programs. Canada has some. And as soon as they come up with something, they patent it, and then they sell the patent rights. And the newest tendency right now is that the patent holder, whoever buys that patent, then tries to restrict supply of that new fruit in order to keep the price up. And they do that by creating what's called a club, and they authorize only certain growers to plant that club. And that really benefits big growers because they don't really want small growers.
But it's a true managed variety that way, but we are confusing the consumer with too many choices. And so I don't know. Yeah, it's there's only so much shelf space and so much supermarkets, and the end seller is going to do to accommodate all these, So it'll be interesting.
Well, so talk a little bit, because the other thing about that you do is directly related to what we were just talking about, and that is you and a couple other guys have gotten together and put in and created, I can remember this going back, Jiminy, 20 years now, where you started working on this vacuum harvester, right? Yeah. I mean, some of the early renditions looked like an octopus that
it was like Dr. Seuss met the mad scientist when it started, and I don't know if it's much better, but so we've looked at the whole commercial end of it, and where we've now planting varieties on a true fruiting wall, a vertical plane of production, and we've stayed with this, anticipating the need of labor efficiencies, and I think more so now than ever, that's a necessity. By most any industry mechanizes sooner or later. So one of our big harvests or labor costs is harvesting the apples. So we have designed and patented, and we have working units on a self-propelled picking platform in a modular vacuum harvest unit that we have attached to these. So the platforms are full season use for trimming, training, trellising, thinning, anything else that you can take ladders out of the scope of things. And by utilizing our vacuum harvest system, we are showing efficiency and even quality pack out gains on the fruit handling by eliminating the ladders and that extra operational handling procedure of putting the apples into a picking bag and then putting them in the box. So there's a lot of value to the system, and right now we've got a unit out west that we are putting a mechanical MOF, Italian packing company. We are incorporating their bin filler on our platform to get away where we always had an optic sensor on it. So we're at the final stage of it now, trying to simple it to get it out there to where there's no more electronics than we need. Because the electric eye worked well, but it's like anything else, you're relying on circuit boards and optic sensors and relays and everything out in the weather. And one thing we've learned is anything will work good in a controlled environment, but you get it out in the real world, out in the field with weather and everything else, that's where we're at. So a long answer to a short question. We've put a lot of years into evolving this, and as the industry stands, like I said before, the bigger growers, what I'm hearing more and more now is where they feel they can make up to get their bottom line back up there is labor efficiencies, and this ties in with that.
And this is DBR.
Yeah, it's our
DBR conveyors, or what's the
DBR conveyor concepts, and we've partnered with Automated Ag out on the West Coast. He's the kind of the main man out there with these self-propelled platforms. So we've shrunk our unit down to accommodate modular plug-and-play unit on his platforms, and it's worth checking out because
it is.
It'll work for most any round firm fruit or vegetable, providing you can reach it. Because it's hands-free, all you're doing is picking and committing the fruit or anything else into the inlet, and it takes it under vacuum to a patented decelerator, which decelerate controls and extracts it out onto a distributor, a turntable, and fills the box automatically.
So just for anybody that hasn't actually had the experience, the actually quintessential fantastic experience of picking apples, normally you would have a picking basket which hangs on your shoulders, and you pick fruit into that. When it's full, you're going to have somewhere around 20 to 30 pounds of apples, and you have to go down the ladder and over to a big wooden box, and you put them into that box. And so as a replacement for that, this would allow you to stay at a certain level because you're on a self-propelled platform that'd take you along, and you'd have people down below picking, people up above picking, and nobody has to go up and down ladders. What's more, you're just picking them into a tube. It's really quite incredible. You should watch it. DBR conveyor concepts.
And Automated Ag.
And Automated Ag. Yep. So it's worth looking at, and you'd be amazed that this guy, he looks scruffy and stuff, but he's still got it.
It all comes down to too much time thinking while you're pruning trees all winter, and you're sitting on a self-propelled pruning tower, and that's where it all started, good, bad, or otherwise.
There we go. So there's so many facets here. So you guys have you kind of came up the ranks and the commercial apple business, and then got tagged up with this wild woman from Wyoming, and now doing retail fruit, but you're also doing something out in Montana. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, Montana's been kind of a second love for me right along, and I've always kept an eye on the fruit growing area out there. It's it's a kind of a little microclimate along the east shore of Flathead Lake, northwest Montana, that allows for fruit production there. Stone fruit, cherries are the mainstay, some apples. So anyway, we had taken a leap of faith, bought a small farm there, and have renovated that. And it's the latest blooming and latest fruit production area for cherries in the nation. So it allows a cherry to be picked for that Labor Day market, which is kind of its little niche. A lot of tourists come through, so it's got a strong retail atmosphere as well. But that's what the Montana thing is. it's got its own set of challenges, but I've put some high-density apples in out there, and this year we're going to probably put, I got a hoop house going in, high tunnel, try and bring some cherries in a little bit earlier for the retail side of it. And I don't know, it's a long ways from Michigan to Montana, but we
well,
try
it's a
and make,
road you're traveling anyways, though.
yeah.
The other way you could look at it is it's going to reduce the commute time between Michigan and Montana.
That's what we're hoping, but if nothing else, it's right on the lake, and so it's a good investment, we hope.
Yeah. And so the cherries are a pretty big part of the business back in Michigan for you, the retail cherry thing. How do you, has that changed a lot? I know there's a lot more people growing cherries now, right?
Yeah. No, there is. And so we do sweet and sour tart cherries, fresh, retail, and wholesale. And I think there's been growth right along with it. We've expanded on a lot of the value-added items for the market, the jams, jellies, and then with a full bakery, keep growing on that, utilizing the fruit, just like Brother Paul does to a larger scale here. But I think this year was more pronounced. I think I looked around other retail operations. There's X amount of them are structured just for the cherries, but the apple market's really strong, and the COVID thing has made a lot of people travel less and I think buy more local. So it's kind of helped the retail side of it, and I think everyone coming out, a lot of people are new this year. So I think it's got a lot of potential to keep growing on that level. And then by direct selling, you have more control over your product and your market and actually your returns. So
yeah, it's a great crop. I mean, cherries are
but there's a reason everybody don't grow them. I tell myself that every year, about as fickle as they can get. But you need the right, we wouldn't do it without the Great Lake, Michigan. We're on the downwind side of it, and that allows it to moderate our temperatures and allows us to raise fruit. And that's the same scenario we have with a large body of water in Montana. So
don't have it here, and you can tell the difference.
No, the most water I see here, body of water, is rain like today, and it shows up in the creek within an hour.
Yeah, indeed. It was 70, almost 80 degrees yesterday when I looked. It was 76 or something. And today the temperature's dropping. They're getting snow in northern Iowa. So
yeah.
This is Iowa. So.
But I got to hats off to you and your family and everybody what you've done here. This is an amazing operation, and it's always a treat to come out here. And there's something new every time I'm here. So
yeah, I got to keep up with the young crowd. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well, I think this is the reason you and I are sitting here is mostly due to the young crowd.
That's right. It is
today's world.
It is today's world. Yep. Get on board or get the hell off. Yep. Here we are again, doing what Rasch Brothers do best, yakking some more. Sort of a follow-up to what we talked about yesterday. So weather report is, we've gone from the 70s down to the 30s, but it's a beautiful sunny day. And here with me is to share this glorious Iowa morning is my brother Mike. Welcome back, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. So one thing we didn't touch on yesterday was a little bit about our family and our history. And I mean, you know better than I will because you're 2 years older than me, what that's all about. But I know, I remember Grandpa, and he had pigs and apples. His grandpa, I understand, also had livestock, or his dad had livestock and apples.
Yeah, and there was some sheep in the mix.
And sheep, sheep in the mix,
Yep.
Cousin Marie actually gave me a sign that shows Robert R. Rasch's Chester White hogs. Yep.
Yeah.
It was an advertisement for him selling Chester White hogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So back in the day, but of course our dad and his whole generation, this was Catholics, Germans, Catholics in the big thriving metropolis of Wright, Michigan. But they had lots of kids. And let's see, he had 4 brothers? Dad had 4 brothers.
4 brothers and all.
Between the 5 of them, they had 44 kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
All of them brilliant, dashing.
Oh, yeah. In their own right, anyway. But no, the big families were good because in our case, it was cheap labor.
Yeah.
The Rasch pay scale
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
We grew up, had to work. We weren't allowed to play sports. So we started out at that 10, 15 cents an hour, and every year you'd get a 5-cent bump.
That's exactly right.
And we were doing adult work. And but all in all, it was good. It taught us responsibility, good work ethics, and I think you need that.
Yeah.
You got to really buckle down if you're going to make a living off the land. And it also, Dad in particular, really let us have our independence. It allowed us to make a lot of mistakes, and we still make mistakes. But as long as we learn from those mistakes, I think that was a good life lesson.
Yeah. Well, for me, it just taught me to be a professional mistake maker, which I thrive at.
Yeah. Well, you get better at it in time, but it don't go away is what I'm saying. I still make mistakes every day, but I like to think, end of the day, I do learn from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know. I went away to college. You stayed on the farm, and one of the things that I was always impressed with was his putting you and Cousin Joe and others into contact with really top-notch people like Stu Carpenter, who could kind of show you the ropes and bring...
Our mentor, so to speak. And it was something really unprecedented then. Nobody was doing that. Yeah. So they hired, like Stu Carpenter, for example, studied at the University of Guelph, very knowledgeable horticulturist and consultant, well-traveled, went to New Zealand, and that was in the 70s, early 70s he went over there several times for the fruit end of it. And so we had him on as a mentor, and he encouraged us to go to New Zealand, a cousin and I. So that was kind of our throwing us into the realm of high density, because we were strictly semi-dwarf, to some degree, mostly standard plantings on the farm with my dad, our dad, and his 4 brothers. We had a partnership. So we came back from there with, I'd say they were 5 to 8 years ahead of us in planting trends, and it was a whole different world. So we came back young, full of ideas, and started to renovate some of the plantings to more of a dwarf, standard central leader tree. A training system, tighter plantings, still freestanding trees, orchards, but it all started to bring everything into scope of where we are now. And
and it really was remarkable because that sort of coincided, that timing, with a general trend in the Michigan industry and Washington and stuff as well, towards really higher density plantings, more intensive care, a little bit more thoughtful pest control. Stu was very almost scientific in his approach.
He was in his approach. He definitely was. But I still go out in a given year, every season, with some of his information and utilize it. Stu Carpenter said we had law roams then, blind wood. He said spray magnesium sulfate on. The magnesium will break that spurs on it, and it did. There's just things, little things that you kind of store and you still use. So that knowledge is always useful. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, and I think
in today's world,
especially in today's world, in some ways, being able to. The other thing that I know is that, like, you were a big part of the Pompsters, and that group of young farmers that would get together in South Haven did this, or Hartford rather, we did the same thing where get together with other growers and see what what they were doing, and especially the more innovative ones. I think that's something that maybe is less. I don't know. Is that happen less?
There's a strong Pompster following yet, and there's a lot of value of that people share what they've learned, share their mistakes, share their gains to a degree, and it's just like the value of going to some of these meetings. Sometimes you get more out of just networking with the people there than the actual meeting, So there's information out there. There's a lot of astute growers, astute people in agriculture. They got to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, they do. Although not as many hats. One of the things that strikes me in thinking back over our history, going back, say, 4 generations or so, is this move away from, it's a narrowing of your agricultural focus. Whereas before maybe there were sheep, who knows, cattle, pigs, apples, peaches, plums. When we grew up, there were prune plums, Italian prune plums, pears, peaches. It was pretty rare orchard that I knew of anyways. You'd know better than I would, but not a lot of people just growing apples.
Right.
Whereas now it's really common that there's a lot of the guys up there on the ridge in Michigan just grow apples, or maybe they grow apples and one other crop.
Yeah, and back then the diversification was all other fruits and other commodities. Mm-hmm. Now it's apples, but it's over different locations or marketing through different outlets.
Channels, yeah.
So that's kind of where the diversification is kind of trended to. Like where we grew up, Paul and I, they called it Fruit Ridge, Peach Ridge. Well, Peach Ridge was based on the old standard 35, 40-foot square plantings. They would put a peach tree in between them. And they would utilize that ground, spray them with the apples. And the peach trees didn't have a lot of life to them, maybe 10 years or so, and they would be out. By then, the apple trees were coming in. So, yeah, they had it all told. They had a lot of unique, really solid ways to diversify and still manage everything.
Of course, the trends in marketing were different too, and there's not a lot of reward for a larger commercial scale guy to not be real specialized. Seemed to me like if you're going to grow apples, you want to be growing, you want top yields like we talked about before. There's just not a lot of margins there, so you better by God be top of your game in terms of yield and quality if you're going to make it in this.
Business. More so today than ever.
And if you're growing asparagus and peaches and apples and sheep and whatever, it's hard to be, as we prove every day, it's hard to be good when you're diverse.
I'm a living proof of that every day. And I keep looking back and I'm trying to do too much and I'm not doing the right job with any of it, because it's get into that hole real easy.
Yeah, but it's hard when you switch to marketing like we do, direct to consumer, retail farm marketing, that people don't want to just have apples, and we're constantly diversifying because we want to fill out the season. We want people here in April as well as in September. It's easy to get people out to an apple orchard in September and October.
Right.
But it's dang hard to just sell them apples in February or April,
Right.
Especially if the apples are getting soft. You want something, and people come out. It's not just for the apples. Let's be honest. They come out.
Whatever you do sell them, you want them back.
Yeah, you want them back, and you want them back often.
Yeah.
And that's one of our principal challenges here is to break this thing where people think about. I mean, it's been striking to me coming into this retail orcharding kind of. Without any experience at it, to see the number of people that say, I come out every year one time. We come out every year. We come out every year one time. And that really doesn't pay the bills very well.
No, but there's something to that. What I've gathered over the years is that the succession of your small fruits kind of go strawberries, cherries, strawberries, asparagus, cherries, blueberries, peaches, apples. And people come out for that allotted time slot in their mind, and then they're ready to go into the next thing. You know, especially if they want to buy it fresh on the farm, retail, or you pick. Pretty much there's offerings in the area or within reason to, you know, travel and do that. So I think that's kind of why we get the same thing where people come out every year, but they only come out once.
Yeah.
And so unless it's a long season, then they might come out again. But usually stuff is just kind of stacked right up. Blueberries are coming in earlier bred varieties every time.
Yeah.
And even the help tends to transition to that. You know, I have to bring a lot of cherries are a very hand labor intensive crop, so I have to bring a lot of help into harvest. Well, I might pull them from some blueberry guys that they're there early, but as soon as they need them, they got to go. And every year it's shorter and shorter time frame I got that help. So there's always something, a curveball every year that you got to kind of know the pitch and kind of swing with it.
Yeah. And that is one of the problems with the lack of diversity. You know, the one thing I don't think very many people could have foreseen or diversified enough to deal completely with COVID. But by and large, I mean, we had a frost May the 9th this year, exactly one day before our official frost-free date, which really took a toll on strawberries. It took a toll on some apples. But we survived with some strawberries. We survived with some apples, and the combination of the two is not a bad year for us. Whereas if we wouldn't have had the strawberries, the apple season was reasonably good, but our crop was short. So I think diversification for an operation that sells direct to the public is essential, unless, you know, I mean, I know some really great operations that's all they do is apples, and that's all they want to do. That's, you know, they just want to be open from the middle of August to the end of October and call it a day, and that's fine. It's hard to bring the next generation in when you're limited in scope that way, because, you know, you're putting a lot of eggs in that one basket.
Right. No, and they've got ideas, and you know, you're living proof here. You've got two on board. You're
gray hair to prove it.
And they've got great ideas and that energy to, you know, tackle it. And you can't discourage that, because I agree. The better operations I see that are more solvent are the very diverse ones. And you can retain help longer that way, you know, because it's seasonal business. You get seasonal help and a lot of turnaround. So, you're only as good as the people around you sometimes.
That's right. Exactly. Well, I think.
Well, we'd like to think our Grandpa Rob Rasch would be proud of us, because one thing, last note to take home, he always, everywhere he went, I still get people that'll say, well, we always remember your grandpa when we were just little toddlers. He would come into the store, he'd come in for parts, always had a bag of apples. And I remember Grandpa distinctly saying, well, you got to give apples away, because even if you give them away, you're moving product. So, and he would follow that up with a bet your boots. And
you bet your boots.
Hit the ground running.
You dang right.
You dang right. And bet your boots. And we could go on and on, but we probably bored your audience enough. And
those two people that watch this thing, they're probably ready to sleep.
They probably got on to better things, but I guess we will too.
Yeah, absolutely we will. Yep. But, well, great having you here, Mike, and look forward to...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and shout out to your familia back there. I mean, I don't know about Cammie, but the other two are all right.
Yeah. Well, we're thinking there's hope for that one yet.
I don't know. She's got a touch of the devil in her, I'm afraid.
Yes, she does, but that should keep her afloat.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to mess with that one.
Nope. All right. Thank you. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, sing out if you did. Sing out if you didn't. What the hell? We'll listen to your complaints as long as they're not too ornery. Let us know if you got anything else you think we should be covering. All the best.